All right. Good morning, all. Thank you all for coming. This is a very important day. Let me start kind of slowly and gradually because I'm sure a few more people are going to uh, walk in a few minutes, hopefully. But as I said, thank you for coming and making the time for this event. Um, I also want to write up front, and I know we'll follow this up later, to thank the people who have helped put this together. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about um, the OE Week, the Open Education Week 2020. Some of you will remember that we had a similar one last year and the year before. The OE Week is celebrated throughout the world. And today's event here at USB is one of those. Let me just go through very quickly with the program that we have for you today. But first of all, I guess I should have introduced myself. I'm Solom Naidu. I'm Pro-Vice Chancellor, Flexible Learning, and Director for the Center for Flexible Learning. And I will be chairing this session along with other people. So today's program comprises a bunch of things, and we'll have a bit of an introduction. The most important thing is the launch of a book, and you will hear more about that book a bit later. But like I was saying, this event is about a celebration of open education throughout the world, by the way. Open Education Week is being celebrated throughout the world under the sponsorship of Open Education Global, which is a professional organization, and it represents the open education movement. As you will see on the slides there, the goal of the open education movement or the open education initiative is to raise awareness and its impact on learning and teaching throughout the world. It's ramped up in the last few years since interest in open education has grown. It spotlights on various activities throughout the world, and if you go to the open education site, which Deepak will show a bit later, you will see various events organized by various organizations throughout the world, and ours is one of them. As I was saying, the open education movement is sort of coordinated by the Open Education Global professional organization, and you can see OE Global on www.oeglobal.org. And it's a global network of organizations, and I sit representing USP on its executive committee. Previously, it used to be called Open Education Consortium, so if you might remember that. Its mission is to promote, support, and advance openness in education around the world. And vision is basically empowerment through education. Envision a world where everyone, everywhere has access to high-quality education. I'll talk a little bit more about open education because some of us might be wondering, well, what is special about open education? What is new about open education? The concept of idea of open education has special meaning at this university because this university was founded on the principle of openness. And one of the ways of looking at what we mean by openness is along these lines. The first thing is open access. If you will remember, one of the universities that resembles very much like our own is the United Kingdom Open University. It was set up around the same time that USB was set up in the 1960s by the Labour government in the United Kingdom, which had its principle to empower communities, people who are unable to access high-quality education and pay for it. So the United Kingdom Open University was set up slightly differently from USB as a fully distance education university, which it is still, and the largest university in the UK with about 200,000 students. And the idea of anybody having access to that education is important. So that's what open access means, that you don't have to have a diploma or year 12 or year 13 to be able to access. And it's also a second chance opportunity, so that, you know, if you were not able to get higher education, access to higher education when you were in your 20s or something, you got married, you had children, you had work, and you wanted to go back to school, then it was a second chance opportunity, and that's what the UK-OU is about. And over the years, the UK-OU has become very competitive, and it's very highly ranked in the UK. USP began with similar premise, but somewhat differently. We were a dual mode, and we still are a dual mode organization, that the face-to-face teaching that happens at the campuses of the university was obviously important, but that was not the only thing. That in 1968, when we were set up, not long after, one of the things that USP did was to establish an external or extension services unit, which would enable and grow into what we are today in terms of giving people not only a second chance, but flexible learning and distance learning opportunities, so that people can access the educational opportunities of the university from wherever they are, from their homes, from their villages. And this was identified in the Morris report. So access is a thing that is very important about and part of open education. Then the other attribute or component of open education is the strategies that we use. What are the strategies that we use? And this is what I mean by open learning. Using of the use of printed materials, let's say, for example, or audiovisual or technology, more so now these days, online learning, which is growing exponentially, and particularly so at the time of the coronavirus. You can see the importance and the value of online learning. So open learning has to do with the strategies and the technologies that you employ to engage in the teaching learning transaction, as opposed to the face-to-face interaction that campus-based educational opportunities are familiar with. The third and a growing component of open education is the engagement in open scholarship. And I'll take a bit of time to explain this, because this is where the focus is quite a bit when we are talking about open education now, that we are moving from a culture or a practice of intellectual property being under rep and cover and available only at a cost. There is a movement around the world which is buying into the idea that scholarship, particularly that scholarship which is publicly funded, should be available and accessible to people freely and openly. So a lot of educational resources are now being developed, and high quality ones, I might add, that are open and accessible without restrictions of copyright laws and also costs. So books like the ones that we are showcasing today are open and free. Although there are some boundaries. For example, you can't change the content of it. So you can use it whichever way you want to, because it's been publicly funded. So we are not going to charge you for it. Similarly, a chemistry textbook that might have been written by someone could be made openly, could be made available free and openly for use for educational purposes, of course. So open scholarship is about that. It's about sharing of educational resources and intellectual property openly and freely. So when we are talking about open movement, the open education movement, this is what we are talking about. This is what we are promoting. Sorry, I've gone that way. All right. Have I gone that way? All right. Open educational practices, I've said it already. Am I on the right slide here? Is embedded in is featured in our strategic plan, as you can see, specifically in 112. It says here, ensure that all programs contain flexible learning opportunities and the effective use of libraries and open educational services, open educational resources. And Livia, thank you very much for showing up today. In addition to this book launch, we have been having a bunch of workshops as well. So I will get Dheeraj to talk about that a little bit in terms of what we are doing in relation to open educational practices. All right.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, PVC. Just going back to the previous slide to say the work that we do, again, is governed by the strategic plan. This is a continuation of the previous strategic plan to say the work that in relation to OERs and making available resources. So again, in the 2019 to 2021 revised strategic plan, we say that the focus is to say all courses that we are developing, or all new courses or all modification to courses will have or should have components of OERs. So, and I think Liviana, through the library, they are making it compulsory in terms of the course proposal form to say there's a huge section, section B, which requires you to list all the resources as part of the course that is being prescribed to the student. So as PVC mentioned, we had 2 workshops on Monday and Tuesday, and thank you to staff who have attended. And what it talked about was trying to integrate open educational resources in the courses. So in terms of the OEP, Open Educational Practices at USP, what all we do at the Center for Flexible Learning, we have an OER policy. For those of you who are not aware, there is a policy on how to go about adapting OER, so integrating resources into your course. Last year, we launched a repository, which is available on the USP page. And it houses some of the books or projects that were part of the 2017-2018 grant scheme. So the university made available a small amount of money, and we had called the expression of interest to staff to say, would you like to work with us in trying to integrate and incorporate OERs in the courses? So the result of some of the projects are available on the repository, and together with other books that were launched as part of the 2018 50th anniversary celebrations. Another initiative that we have is the USP Global Initiative. So this is a separate platform to Moodle, and what it does is that it allows for courses, specialized or very focused courses to be made available to students either for free or for a cost. And some of the courses that have been launched so far include a course on climate change, a course on public health and NCDs. So this was offered last year in December. The climate change course was also offered last year in January. There is a possibility that it will be offered again later in the year. The same with the public health course. We have a series of courses on aviation law. So this is a small program that is being offered to people in the area of aviation law. And it comprises of 4 courses. The first module is free for the students to come and have a look to say what the course and the program offers. And the other 3 courses are for a fee, around 350 Fijian dollars. And at the moment, we have about 6 paid students in the stream, mostly from the industry, from the aviation industry itself, like from the Fiji Airways and also from the Civil Aviation Authority of Fiji. We are also working as part of our activities last year. We ran a workshop on youth development, youth skills development, and as an outcome of that, we are working on 3 courses that will be offered from April onwards, and these include youth advocacy for climate action, youth activism, and youth entrepreneurship. So these are some of the courses that will be made available on the USP Global platform free of charge for the general public to see. We also have a course on functional numeracy that is currently going on, sponsored by the Commonwealth of Learning, and that is due to finish in 2 weeks' time. Again, that is a free course available to the public, what we do as part of that is also gather feedback to say what other courses are they interested in. We are having talks with the Oceania Center to have to look at possibilities of actually offering courses in the area of Pacific Studies as well. Now, talking about the OER policy, just for the benefit of those who don't know about the policy, so what it does is that it tries to provide direction for the adoption and use of OER in order to increase access to and support high quality teaching and learning at USP. This is something that I treated in the workshop on Monday and Tuesday to say that over the years we've seen that students really do not purchase textbooks, so that is a grave concern in terms of whether students have access to the resources or not. So one of the major reasons to push for OERs is to ensure that students have access to the learning resources. And what you see in terms of the images at the bottom is a way of, it's one of the schemes of open licensing as opposed to copyright. So that forms part of the Creative Commons licensing type. And what we have is that we have 6 license types that is part of the Creative Commons license scheme. And what you see on the right is it's listed from the most free and open of license to the most to the least free in terms of restrictive, or in terms of the restrictions that apply to the licenses. Note that all the CC, all this Creative Commons work is available for free, so you are not really paying for it. So the free aspect is more like the freedom to do what you'd like to do with the resources. So the first license is the CC BY, which means that if any resource has that particular license type, you can use the resource at will, do whatever you'd like to do, as long as you give attribution to that particular, the original work. So I could come up with this particular program, you may tweak it, change it, and come up with a new version. You'd like to reshare it, feel free to do so, as long as you acknowledge to say that the idea or the concept was actually the original particular person's or the author's work. So that's the CC BY license. Then you have the CC BY SA. SA stands for share alike. So again, you are free to do what you want to do with the resource. You can adapt, adopt, remix. You can distribute. But what the license says is that the derived work that or the remixed work that you have needs to be shared along the same license type. So there is no restriction in terms of not modifying the content. So like, again, if this is a derivation of the work that you have done, you need to share it along the same lines. Then you have the CC BY ND. ND stands for non-derivative, which means that you cannot make any changes to the original work. You can use it, you are free to distribute it, you are free to adopt it, but you are not allowed to actually adapt it in the sense that you cannot make any changes. So like PVC mentioned, the book that is being launched today carries the CC BY ND license. And what it allows you to do is that it allows you to read the reflections or the piece by the original authors, but you are not allowed to actually make any changes to their reflections. So depending on the context of the work that is being published, then you can actually choose and apply certain license types. The other component is the NC, which stands for non-commercial. So basically what that means is that because the ND license is not there, so in any of the license types, if you see that ND is present, that means that you cannot make any changes to the original work. So it's non-derivative, which means you are not allowed to make any changes. It needs to be transmitted in its original form. Where you don't see ND, you can basically adopt, adapt, and remix the content. So that's the key to say. Anywhere you see ND, you can't modify the content. So the NC component is the non-commercial aspect to say that the open textbooks that are available mostly carries this license to say you are free to adapt, but you are not allowed to actually make any profit out of the work that you have done in that sense. Or I'm basically taking that particular book and selling it to students. All right, so if that carries that license, that work carries that license, and you say that, okay, this book is like $5. Even though it is available for free, the license says that you are not allowed to actually make any profit out of it. Okay, so that's the NC component. Another combination is the CC by NC SA. So similar things apply. You are not allowed to, you are allowed to make changes, but you are not allowed to make any profit out of the work that is being distributed. And also any derived work needs to be shared along the same lines. So using the same license type. So that's the CC by NC SA. And the last bit is which is the most restrictive of license in that sense, is the CC by NC and ND. So no modifications, and you are not allowed to make any profit out of, or sell that particular work for any profit. So that is, in a nutshell, what the CC license tries to do. So if we were to put it in a graphical format again, opposed to the CC license is what we say is available in the public domain. So this is the general web, and anything that expires its copyright lifetime, somewhere around 50 to 75 years, will then basically be registered in the public domain. So nobody really really owns that work any further than the copyright time period. So the difference between the CC license and the public domain is that all the CC Creative Commons work requires attribution by default. So any work that you use needs to be attributed to the original author. Whereas in the public domain, you do not need to give credit. So the next time you make PowerPoint slides, if you get something on the web from Google search, try to make a point to say whether this is in the public domain, or if it is not, then do we actually provide the reference or the source of the resources that we actually put in the work that we do. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is what it does. So all the Creative Commons license work allows you to copy and publish. Attribution is required. Where NC is not part of the license type, you can actually use it for commercial purposes. Modify and adopt, yes, again, wherever there is no ND license, you can remix the content. And the revised work that you come up with, depending on the license type, you can relicense your work in a different way. So if this particular program, as I was saying, does not have the ND or share-alike license type, I can actually modify it and perhaps say that people need to buy this, or make it a possibility to say people cannot change this. Okay, so the revised work, depending on the license type, you can actually apply different licenses, but note that once a Creative Commons license is applied, you cannot revoke it. So if you are putting up your work under Creative Commons license, once applied, you cannot revoke the license type. So if you shared a multi-million-dollar idea or concept under CC BY license, somebody can take it and make money out of it. So make sure if you do, or if and when you do license your work, try to apply the most suitable of license type. And on that note, we are always there to help you to choose the most appropriate license for the work that you do. And you are free to get in touch with us. The last bit, in terms of where you can find resources relating to open education, we have an open education website with the URL openedu.usp.ac.fj. As PVC Naidu was saying, we have been featured in the OE Week Global Celebration. So if you were to click on the link, it will take you to the OE Week list of events. And all the other events in terms of what's happening is also listed to say which university or institution is celebrating and how they are celebrating the event. So information relating to different repositories are available. The library resource, the library also has a list of open access resources. So if you don't know the link, you can come to the OpenEdu website and then get redirected to the library website. We also have the links to the OER policy and also the repository as well as the USP Global platform. So thank you for listening in terms of the OER policy. I guess once people are familiar with the policy, it becomes easier to say the kind of work that we are trying to do. Over to PVC. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. It was important to go through that in that kind of detail because even though there's a lot of people in this room who are familiar with what we're talking about, it is important to reiterate that this is our business. Engagement in open learning and open scholarship is part of the DNA of a university such as ours. And the OER policy, which has been around for about 2 years now, is on our policy library, and it is our job to keep talking about it so that more and more academics become familiar with it and start to adopt or comply with that policy, gradually but surely. So that was the intention of engagement in that kind of a conversation. And we are going to continue to provide support for that, as Deepak was saying. But let me move on here a little bit to make one more point before I do, that the Creative Commons licensing that Deepak was talking about is an alternative licensing format for the traditional copyright licensing format that we are familiar with. So we, in a sense, have different ways of licensing intellectual property now. And that was all that about. Let me now move a little bit to the next part of the day's events, which is more interesting. But before I do that, my humble apologies, I didn't acknowledge the presence of Pro-Chancellor here, who's been a champion and a great believer in the work that we do at this university. Thank you, sir, for coming to this event and for all the other occasions that you have shown up at that we have invited you to. Now, let me go on to talk a little bit more about what we are going to do next. And the next we are going to talk about the TeL project. Around late 2017, was it 2018, there was, I joined this university around, I think, early 2017. And one of the things that I was told earlier on, that there is a great deal of interest at the university in its engagement with technology in teaching and learning. This is what we're talking about when I was talking about the use of technology and the use of open learning strategies for teaching and learning. And the senior management team therefore made available a little bit of money for us to integrate technology into teaching and learning more systemically and systematically. What we did, therefore, is took that money and put it into a pool and asked for expressions of interest from the academic community within the university, not just the academic community, but teams of people, to integrate technology in teaching and learning and to promote the scholarship of teaching and learning at the university. Along the lines that we have articulated in the flexible learning policy and the OER policy, which are the two policies that were developed about the same time and approved by the Senate of the university. The expressions of interest were received. I think we received quite a bit, which was encouraging. So we screened them and we reviewed them and we worked with the teams to come up with a series of projects. The idea of the TeL's so became the TeL's project, Technology Enhanced Learning. What's the S for? Sarishna, I don't know what the, or is it just the plural of TeL, right? Technology Enhanced in Learning project. What we were trying to do is to push boundaries of the teaching and learning transaction and break down the walls among contributors to this process. The word transaction is critical there, because when you think about teaching and learning, what is it really? It's a transaction between several attributes. It's a transaction between the teacher and the learners, the transaction between the learners and the content. It's a transaction between the learners and the organization. It's a transaction between the learners, teachers, and the learning environment. There's several ways you could look at that transaction. Transaction means things are going both ways, not one way, not in one direction. So it makes sense to talk about teaching, learning, transaction as a process. And what we were trying to do as part of this initiative is not simply to give out money to people and say, okay, here's the money, go ahead, do whatever you want to do, whatever you feel like doing. But we wanted to promote an agenda, which is to try and change the way the learning and teaching transaction is taking place along the lines that we have articulated in the open education resources policy and the flexible learning policy. Too often, as one might argue, teaching is seen as a transaction between the teacher and the learner, the kind of thing that we are doing now. And the bulk of the responsibility is on the teacher to articulate the content as best as possible. But in a technology-dense learning environment, there are many other ways that transaction could be taking place. A learner could be learning by himself or herself without the influence or the direct influence of the teacher in a technology-rich environment. That does not mean that the teacher is not relevant. It means that the teacher needs to orchestrate that kind of a learning experience. And more, teaching is therefore, in a technology-dense learning environment, becoming an open affair, not so much confined to the four walls of a classroom, because there's no such thing as a classroom now. The classroom is more open. I mean, you look at what's happening in China right now. China is scrambling to get online. For years, not paying respect to online and distant learning. The interest in China is growing, and a lot of people, and I know a lot of people in Beijing and other places in China, are taking the shortcut. They're basically recording lectures behind or within the four walls of the classroom and just making it available online. That is a very impoverished form of online learning, because online learning can be richer than that. So we're making mistakes that we have made in the past and not learning from our past. And there was another goal of our project is to capitalize on what we know and make use of it in this new environment, the new opportunity that we had with this amount of money from SMT. The book that you will see in a minute is a product of that work. The work really began around 2018 by the time we had the money, and then we had a few mishaps in 2019, fire and relocation, which slowed the process down, and also people leaving and joining the team. So there were challenges, of course, as you would expect. But what you see in this book is slightly different from what you would have probably imagined. I'm not saying that you would have thought that. We could have produced this book in different ways. One of the ways is to ask the teams to actually write what they had done and produce project reports, which they have done and will do. What we wanted to do in this book was to capture the scholarship of teaching and learning. A lot of people talk about the scholarship of teaching and learning as a component of academic practice. When we are talking about scholarship in research, we understand what we mean. All of us who are academics engage in the scholarship of our research because we're trained to be researchers and we know how to engage with it. A lot of us are not so familiar with how to engage in the scholarship of teaching and learning. And what we try to do with this project is to promote the scholarship of teaching, to get academics to look at the teaching in the same way they would look at or approach a research project, so that you're not simply there to articulate or explain a body of content, but look at the learning and teaching transaction. So think of teaching as getting people to think of teaching as a design activity, and then systematically designing it and systematically implementing it, and then collecting data, reliable and robust data on the impact of the design experience on the learners, and then reporting the data. That was one side of the story. What we tried to capture in this book is the experience of doing that, because that is often sort of left aside. What is the process that the teacher went through, the teams went through, is harder to capture. And this book captures that experience. So getting people to think about the experience of designing an innovative learning strategy using technology, and then implementing it, and then collecting data, robust data, qualitative data and quantitative data, and then reflecting on the experience of doing that. So what you'll find in these books are the stories of practitioners of engaging this process. And that's what I meant by pushing the boundaries. This kind of work is not new. It's been done previously, and I, for one, have been involved in doing this for a very long time. I don't want you to go through all of this because it'll take time. But one of the things I wanted to do was to just flesh examples of this kind of work that has been done. I did a significant project in Sri Lanka, working with the teachers throughout the country, engaging in this kind of activity, and then getting them to reflect on their experience. And while we were doing that, this idea of dreaming and dream weaving came to the fore, because for a lot of teachers teaching in the high schools and the Sri Lankan school system, in the impoverished situation, resource-wise, for a lot of them it was about dreaming to be an effective teacher, an effective practitioner, and then weaving those dreams together and reflecting on their experience. So that's where the concept of dreaming comes about. And once we had done the work with the teachers, we produced a book like that. And then we, of course, then put that book, because it's open access book, we could put it online, people can see it and use it without changing, of course, the content of it. And of course, then subsequently developing a website. So I'm saying that the work that we have done here is not finished. We could take this, and we will take this, and then develop a website on an open education website. And your stories that you have told in print form, in the limited amount of space that you had in this book, could be told online. And other people could engage with your stories. So you could continue this conversation forever, for much longer. So what we have begun here, this is not the end of the line. This is, we're almost in the middle of the line, that we are going to continue to take these stories online and continue the conversation. So this kind of work has been done before, and this is the nature of this work that I'm talking about. Professor Richard Cole, who sponsored much of this work during the time he was with us, said that the genesis of this book lies in a long-standing commitment by the university to do its utmost to provide a high-quality tertiary education. And within the confines of the money that we had and access to people that we had, even then we have a diversity of topics, and it's a testament to the complexity. And you will hear that I'm going to stop talking in a little while so you can hear from the authors themselves about what they did. And I've said in so many words, that what we are trying to do here is not new, number one. but is so integral to the nature, to the idea of the University of the South Pacific, which is not a campus-based experience alone, and also very, very much so a technology-dense learning environment, if you consider even the print word being a technology. So, with that, we are just about moving on to the next phase of this event, which is basically now inviting people to give us a brief overview of their experience of what I was talking about.
We have a quick 5-minute break just to ensure that the presentations are done.
Okay.
So in that space, they can grab coffee or something outside.
So Deepak is saying, while making sure that their presentations here, you can take a little bit of a break. There's coffee outside if you wanted to, or take a bathroom break or whatever. We just have 5 minutes of a recess. Thanks.
Eroni's video is quite good. Yeah.
Oh, you hold on mic and just goes.
I went to sneeze into it.
No, you
No, you just indicate like.